The black stallion reared up on its hind legs, hooves slicing through the dusty air like twin sabers, and every man in the corral scrambled backward except for one woman who stood perfectly still, her voice soft as morning mist rolling over the Awahi Mountains. It was September 1882 in Ruby City, Idaho, a silver mining town that had seen better days but still clung to life in the southwestern corner of the territory. And Katherine Sawyer had arrived on the morning stage with nothing but a worn leather satch case and a reputation that preceded her by 3 counties. The stallion's eyes rolled white with terror, foam flecking his midnight coat, but Katherine didn't flinch. She simply stood there in her dust-covered traveling dress, one hand extended palm down, and began to whisper. The words were unintelligible to the men watching from behind the fence rails, but the effect was immediate. The horse's ears swiveled forward, his powerful muscles began to relax, and within 30 seconds he had all 4 hooves planted firmly on the ground, trembling but no longer violent. Nathan Rivers leaned against the corral post, his weathered hands gripping the rough wood as he watched the impossible scene unfold. He was 32 years old, owner of the Rising Sun Ranch that sprawled across 2,000 acres of high desert and mountain grassland, and he had been trying to break that particular stallion for 2 solid weeks. 3 of his best ranch hands had rope burns to show for their efforts, and 1 had a cracked rib. Yet this woman, who looked to be in her mid-20s with copper-colored hair escaping from beneath her modest bonnet, had the animal eating out of her hand in less time than it took to boil coffee. "I'll be damned," muttered Frank Holloway, Nathan's ranch foreman, a grizzled 50-year-old who had been working cattle and horses since before Nathan was born. "Never seen anything like it in all my years." Katherine continued her low, melodic whisper, taking 1 step closer to the stallion, then another. Her movements were fluid, deliberate, carrying none of the nervous energy that horses instinctively feared. When she was close enough to touch him, she raised her hand slowly to his muzzle, letting him catch her scent. The horse nickered softly, pressing his velvet nose into her palm. Nathan pushed away from the fence and strode into the corral, his boots kicking up small clouds of Idaho dust. He was tall, over 6 feet, with dark brown hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of storm clouds. 2 days of stubble shadowed his jaw, and his work shirt had seen better days, but he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who knew his own worth and didn't need to prove it. "Madam," he said, removing his hat as he approached. "Nathan Rivers. I own this ranch." Katherine turned to look at him, and he found himself staring into eyes the color of summer sage, green with hints of gray that shifted in the afternoon light. She was prettier than he had expected, with a scattering of freckles across her nose and a mouth that looked like it smiled often, though it wasn't smiling now. There was wariness in her expression, the kind that came from disappointment and hard lessons learned. "Katherine Sawyer," she replied, her voice carrying a slight drawl that spoke of years spent farther south, maybe Texas or New Mexico territory. "Though I suspect you already knew that, Mr. Rivers. Word travels fast in small towns." "It does," Nathan admitted, settling his hat back on his head. "Heard tell you were arriving on today's stage. Heard you have a way with difficult horses." He gestured at the now calm stallion, who was nosing at Katherine's shoulder like a overgrown puppy. "Seems the stories weren't exaggerated." "Stories rarely are when it comes to what people consider unnatural," Katherine said, and there was an edge to her words that made Nathan study her more closely. "I expect you'll want a demonstration before making any decision about employment." "I just watched you do what 4 experienced men couldn't accomplish in 2 weeks," Nathan said bluntly. My ranch needs someone like you, Miss Sawyer. Question is, what brings a woman with your particular talent all the way to Ruby City? This isn't exactly a thriving metropolis anymore, not since the silver started playing out. Catherine's hand stilled on the stallion's neck. Perhaps I prefer places that are on the quieter side, Mr. Rivers. Less attention, fewer questions. There was a story there, Nathan could tell, and probably not a happy one. But he was a practical man, and the fact remained that he had 20 horses that needed proper training, a ranch to run with too few reliable hands, and a woman standing in his corral who could apparently work miracles. Room and board included, he said. $30 a month, plus a percentage if you can get my horses trained well enough to fetch premium prices at the livestock auction in Boise City come spring. That's fair wages for the work. Catherine's eyebrows rose slightly. That's more than fair, Mr. Rivers. Most ranchers offer half that to their horse breakers, and they'd offer even less to a woman. I pay for skill, not gender, Nathan replied. And I've been watching you since you climbed down from that stage. The way you moved through town, you were cataloging every person, every building, every potential threat. You're running from something, Miss Sawyer, and I won't pry into what that might be. But I'll tell you straight, this ranch is a safe place. I don't tolerate troublemakers, and I protect the people who work for me. You do your job, and you'll have nothing to worry about here. For a long moment, Katherine simply looked at him, and Nathan had the distinct impression he was being evaluated just as thoroughly as he had evaluated her. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she finally nodded. I accept your offer, Mr. Rivers. When would you like me to start? Yesterday would have been good, Nathan said, allowing himself a small smile. But tomorrow morning will do, sunrise. I'll have Frank show you to the bunkhouse. We've got a separate cabin for the cook, but it's occupied. The bunkhouse has a private room at the far end that we've used for storage. It's not fancy, but it's clean and it locks from the inside. That will be more than adequate, Katherine said. She gave the stallion one final pat, then turned to leave the corral. Nathan watched her walk away, noting the straight set of her shoulders and the way she kept her head up despite whatever shadows she was carrying. Frank fell into step beside her, already launching into what was undoubtedly a lengthy explanation of ranch operations and expectations. Nathan stayed in the corral with the stallion, who had remained calm even after Catherine's departure. He approached the horse slowly, extending his hand the way he had seen her do. The stallion snorted but didn't bolt, allowing Nathan to stroke his neck. "What did she say to you, boy?" Nathan murmured. "What magic words does she know that the rest of us don't?" The horse, predictably, had no answers. But as Nathan left the corral and headed toward the ranch house to clean up before supper, he found himself thinking that maybe, just maybe, hiring Katherine Sawyer would turn out to be the best decision he had made all year. The Rising Sun Ranch House was a sprawling single-story structure built from local timber and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides and offered views of the Awahi Mountains to the south and west. Nathan had built it himself 5 years ago, after his father died and left him the ranch. It was too big for one man, really, with 4 bedrooms and a kitchen large enough to feed a dozen ranch hands, but Nathan had built it with the future in mind. A future that, at 32, seemed increasingly unlikely to materialize. He washed up at the pump behind the house, scrubbing the dust and sweat from his face and arms, then changed into a clean shirt before heading to the cookhouse for supper. The cookhouse was separate from the main house, a practical arrangement that kept the heat and smoke of cooking fires away from living quarters during the brutal Idaho summers. Sam Chen, the ranch cook, had been with Nathan since the beginning, a Chinese immigrant who had come west to work the railroads and stayed to make a living with his exceptional culinary skills. "Heard we have new horsebreaker," Sam said as Nathan entered the cookhouse, where long tables could seat up to 20 men during busy seasons. Currently, the ranch employed only 8 hands including Frank, which meant most of the tables sat empty. "Woman, they say." "They say correctly," Nathan confirmed, filling a plate with Sam's beef stew and fresh baked bread. "Katherine Sawyer. She'll be staying in the bunkhouse room." Sam nodded approvingly. "Good. Ranch needs good horse trainer. Those animals you bought at auction in July, they are too wild." "Men afraid of them." "Not anymore," Nathan said. "You should have seen her, Sam. That black stallion was acting like a kitten by the time she was done with him." "Must see this myself," Sam said, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Tomorrow I bring her extra food." Hard work requires good food. Nathan ate his supper with the ranch hands, listening to their chatter about the day's work. They had been moving cattle to higher pastures, preparing for the winter months when snow would blanket the lower elevations. It was good, honest work, and Nathan felt the familiar satisfaction of a day well spent. But his mind kept drifting to Katherine Sawyer and the shadows he had seen in her sage-green eyes. That night, lying in his too large bed in his too empty house, Nathan stared at the ceiling and wondered what had driven Katherine to Ruby City. The town's population had been declining steadily since the silver mines began to play out 3 years ago. Most people were leaving, not arriving. Yet she had come here specifically, traveling what must have been a considerable distance based on her accent and the worn state of her traveling clothes. Running from something, he had said, and she hadn't denied it. But running from what? An abusive husband, the law. Some scandal that had made her previous home untenable. Nathan wasn't a nosy man by nature, but he couldn't help his curiosity. There was something about Katherine that intrigued him beyond her obvious skill with horses. He finally fell asleep sometime after midnight, and when he woke before dawn, as was his habit, his first thought was of the woman who would be arriving at his corral at sunrise. Katherine was already there when Nathan arrived, standing beside the fence in the pre-dawn darkness, her copper hair braided and pinned up beneath a wide-brimmed hat that looked like it had weathered many seasons. She had changed from her traveling dress into more practical clothing, sturdy canvas pants, a simple cotton shirt, and scuffed leather boots. The outfit was well worn but clean, and Nathan appreciated her practicality. "Morning, Miss Sawyer," he said, coming to stand beside her. "You're early." "Habit," Katherine replied, her attention focused on the horses in the larger corral beyond. "My father always said that successful people are the ones who show up before they're expected and leave after the work is done. Wise man, your father." Something flickered across Katherine's face, gone too quickly for Nathan to identify. He had his moments. Nathan decided not to push. Instead, he opened the gate and led her into the corral where 5 horses stood watching their approach with varying degrees of suspicion. "These are the ones that need the most work. That black stallion from yesterday, we're calling him Midnight for obvious reasons, is probably the most difficult, but these 5 aren't far behind. 3-year-olds, all of them, and they've had limited human contact before the auction." Katherine walked slowly among the horses, studying each one with an intensity that reminded Nathan of how a prospector might study a potentially valuable ore sample. She didn't try to touch them yet, just observed their body language, the way they positioned themselves relative to each other and to her. "They're frightened," she said finally. "Not mean, not vicious, just scared. Someone handled them roughly before you got them, probably multiple someones. They've learned that humans mean pain and constraint, so they fight. Can you unteach them that?" "Yes," Katherine said with quiet confidence. It will take time and patience and consistency, but yes, I can help them remember that not all humans are a threat. She turned to look at Nathan directly. The question is whether you and your men can maintain what I teach them. If they're handled roughly again after I've done the work, they'll revert, and it will be even harder to reach them the second time. My men will follow whatever instructions you give them, Nathan said firmly. And if they don't, they'll answer to me. Frank can be gruff, but he's not cruel, and I don't employ anyone who is. The rough handling these horses got was before they came to my ranch. Katherine nodded, seeming satisfied with his answer. Then we can begin. I'll start with the mare, the sorrel one in the back. She's the most receptive, and once she trusts me, the others will be more willing to try. Nathan watched as Katherine approached the sorrel mare with the same careful, deliberate movements she had used with Midnight the day before. Her voice dropped to that low whisper again, and though he strained to hear the words, he couldn't make them out. It was frustrating and fascinating in equal measure. "What are you saying to them?" he asked when Katherine paused to let the mare process her approach. Katherine glanced at him, and for the first time he saw a hint of amusement in her expression. "Nothing magical, Mr. Rivers. I'm simply speaking in a tone and rhythm that horses find calming. The specific words don't matter, it's the sound, the cadence, the lack of threat in my voice. Horses are prey animals. They're hardwired to detect danger, and human speech usually registers as dangerous because it's loud, erratic, and often accompanied by aggressive body language. I'm just removing all those danger signals. You make it sound simple." "The concept is simple," Katherine corrected. "The execution requires practice and patience, two things most people don't have enough of." She returned her attention to the mare, who had crept close enough to sniff Katherine's outstretched hand. "That's it, sweetheart. Nobody's going to hurt you. You're safe now." The mare's ears flicked forward, and she took another tentative step closer. Katherine waited, utterly motionless except for her lips forming those whispered words. Finally, the mare stretched out her neck and touched her nose to Katherine's palm. "Good girl," Katherine murmured, her voice full of warmth. "Such a brave, beautiful girl." Nathan felt something tighten in his chest as he watched the scene unfold. There was something almost intimate about the way Katherine interacted with the horses, a gentleness, an understanding that spoke of deep empathy. He wondered if she showed the same softness to people, or if she reserved it only for animals who couldn't betray her trust. Over the following days, Nathan found himself spending more time at the corrals than ranch management strictly required. He told himself he was observing Katherine's methods so he could ensure his men followed them properly, but the truth was more complicated. He was drawn to her in a way he hadn't been drawn to anyone in years, captivated by her quiet competence and the glimpses of vulnerability she occasionally let slip through her careful guard. Katherine, for her part, seemed focused entirely on her work. She arrived at the corrals before dawn and rarely left before sunset, working with patient determination to win the trust of each horse in turn. Midnight, the black stallion, proved to be as difficult as Nathan had predicted, but Katherine never lost her temper or her patience. She simply returned day after day, whispering and waiting, until finally the stallion began to accept her presence without panic. "You're a natural teacher," Nathan commented one evening as they walked back from the corrals together, the late September sun painting the mountains in shades of gold and amber. "Have you thought about taking on students, passing along your knowledge?" Katherine's expression closed down immediately. "No, I work alone, Mr. Rivers." "Nathan," he said, "we've been working together for 2 weeks now. I think we can dispense with the formalities." She looked at him sideways, and he caught the faintest hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth. Very well, Nathan, but my answer remains the same. I prefer to work alone. May I ask why? You may ask, Katherine said, but that doesn't mean I'll answer. They walked in silence for a while, their boots crunching on the hard, packed earth of the ranch road. The evening air was cooling rapidly, as it always did in the high desert, and Nathan could smell the sage that grew in silvery green patches across the landscape. I had a teaching position once, Katherine said suddenly, her voice so quiet that Nathan had to lean closer to hear. At a ranch in New Mexico Territory. I was 19 years old and convinced I could change the world one horse at a time. The ranch owner's son decided he wanted to change me instead. Nathan felt anger kindle in his gut. Did he hurt you? He tried, Katherine said flatly. I broke his nose and 2 of his fingers. Then I left before his father could have me arrested for assault. That was 6 years ago, and I've been moving ever since, never staying anywhere long enough for my reputation to catch up with me. What reputation? Nathan asked, confused. The reputation of being able to defend yourself against an attacker. The reputation of being a woman who fights back, Katherine said. Apparently that makes me dangerous, unsuitable for polite society, and a bad influence on other women who might get ideas about standing up for themselves. Nathan stopped walking, and Katherine stopped too, turning to face him. In the fading light, her eyes looked more gray than green, and there was a weariness in them that made Nathan want to promise her she would never have to run again. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, he said bluntly. Any man who would fault you for defending yourself isn't worth the air he breathes. And for what it's worth, Miss Sawyer, Katherine, you're safe here. No one on my ranch will harm you or judge you for protecting yourself. You have my word on that. Katherine studied his face for a long moment, and Nathan met her gaze steadily, letting her see the sincerity in his eyes. Finally, she nodded. Thank you, Nathan. That means more than you probably realize. They resumed walking, but something had shifted between them. Some invisible barrier had lowered just slightly. Nathan didn't push for more information, but over the following weeks, Katherine began to open up in small increments. She told him about growing up in Texas, the daughter of a horse breaker who had taught her everything he knew before dying of pneumonia when she was 17. She spoke of her mother's remarriage to a man who disapproved of Katherine's unladylike skills and insisted she learn proper domestic arts instead. She described the years of drifting from ranch to ranch, always moving on before anyone could dig too deeply into her past or expect more from her than she was willing to give. Nathan, in turn, told her about his own life, about inheriting the ranch from his father and the weight of responsibility that came with it, about his mother, who had died giving birth to a stillborn daughter when Nathan was 10, leaving him and his father to figure out life together, about the loneliness of running a ranch in a declining town, watching friends and neighbors leave one by one for more prosperous opportunities elsewhere. Why do you stay? Katherine asked one afternoon in mid-October as they worked together to repair a section of corral fence. The aspen trees on the mountain slopes had turned brilliant gold, and the air carried the sharp scent of approaching winter. You could sell the ranch, move to Boise City or even farther west, start fresh somewhere with more potential for growth. Nathan hammered a nail into the fence post before answering. This land is in my blood, I suppose. My grandfather homesteaded this valley back in the 50s, when this was Oregon Territory and Idaho didn't even exist yet. My father expanded the ranch and made it profitable. Now it's my turn to carry it forward, and I'm not about to give up just because times are hard. Besides, this place is beautiful. Why would I want to leave? Katherine looked out across the ranch, taking in the rolling grasslands, the distant mountains, the endless expanse of big sky overhead. "You're right," she said softly. "It is beautiful. I had forgotten what it feels like to stay in one place long enough to really see it." "Maybe you should try it sometime," Nathan said, keeping his tone casual even though his heart was suddenly beating faster. "Staying, I mean." Katherine was quiet for so long that Nathan thought she might not respond at all. Then she said, "Maybe I will." The first snow came in early November, a light dusting that melted by mid-morning but served as a warning of harder weather to come. Nathan's cattle were safely in their winter pastures, and the horses that Katherine had been training were making remarkable progress. Even Midnight, the difficult black stallion, now accepted a saddle and rider without violent protest, though he remained spirited and strong-willed. "He'll make someone an excellent mount," Katherine said as she watched Nathan ride Midnight around the corral. "He has heart and intelligence, and he's finally learning to trust. The right rider could do great things with him." Nathan guided Midnight to a stop beside Katherine and dismounted. "I was thinking I might keep him for myself. Unless you'd like him." Katherine reached up to stroke Midnight's neck, and the stallion lowered his head to nuzzle her shoulder. "He's bonded with both of us, I think, but he's too much horse for everyday ranch work. You need him for something special." "I was considering entering him in some races next spring," Nathan admitted. "There's good money in it, and Midnight has the speed and stamina to compete. What do you think?" "I think you should do it," Katherine said, "and I think I should help you train him for it." Racing requires different skills than ranch work, and it would be a shame to waste his potential. So they began a new phase of training, working together to prepare Midnight for the racing circuit. It meant spending even more time in each other's company, and Nathan couldn't pretend anymore that his feelings for Katherine were purely professional. He was falling in love with her, had been falling for weeks now, and the realization both thrilled and terrified him. He knew Katherine was still carrying the weight of her past, still half convinced that she would need to move on eventually. He saw it in the way she never fully unpacked her belongings, in how she sometimes got a distant look in her eyes as though she were mentally calculating the fastest route out of town. Nathan wanted to tell her that she didn't have to run anymore, that she could build a life here if she wanted, but he was afraid of pushing too hard and driving her away. The opportunity to speak came on a cold December evening when a winter storm rolled in from the mountains, bringing with it heavy snow and howling winds. Nathan had been in the barn checking on the animals when the storm hit with sudden fury, and he barely made it back to the ranch house before visibility dropped to nearly zero. He was shaking snow from his coat when he heard a knock at the door. Katherine stood on his porch, covered in snow and shivering. "The stove in my bunkhouse room went out," she said, her teeth chattering. "I tried to relight it, but the wind is too strong. The flames keep getting blown out." "Come in," Nathan said immediately, pulling her inside and shutting the door against the storm. "You're half frozen. Get over by the fireplace while I fetch some blankets." He stoked the fire in the main room's large stone fireplace until flames roared up the chimney, then piled blankets around Katherine's shoulders as she huddled close to the warmth. Her lips were tinged blue, and her fingers were stiff with cold as she tried to unbutton her snow-covered coat. "Here, let me," Nathan said, kneeling beside her. He carefully unfastened the buttons and helped her shrug out of the wet coat, then unlaced her boots and pulled them off. Her socks were soaked through, so he removed those too, trying not to notice how small and delicate her feet looked in his large, calloused hands. "We need to get you warm. I'll make some hot coffee." He moved to the kitchen, grateful for the excuse to put some distance between them before he did something stupid like pull her into his arms. When he returned with 2 steaming mugs, Katherine had stopped shivering quite so violently, and some color had returned to her face. "Thank you," she said, accepting the coffee and wrapping both hands around the mug. "I thought I could make it back to the bunkhouse before the storm got too bad, but the weather changed faster than I expected." "Mountain storms do that," Nathan said, settling into the chair across from her. "You'll have to stay here tonight. The guest room is ready, and I'll find you some dry clothes to sleep in." Katherine nodded, sipping her coffee. They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the wind howl around the house and the fire crackle on the hearth. Nathan studied Katherine's profile in the flickering firelight, noting the graceful line of her neck, the way tendrils of copper hair had escaped her braid and curled around her face. "Nathan," Katherine said suddenly, still looking into the fire, "why haven't you married?" The question caught him off guard. "I could ask you the same thing. I asked first." She turned to look at him, and there was something in her expression he couldn't quite read. "You're a good man with a successful ranch. Surely there have been women who would have been happy to marry you." Nathan considered his answer carefully. "There was someone once. Sarah Whitaker, the banker's daughter. We courted for about 6 months 5 years ago. She was beautiful and educated, everything a man could want. But when my father died and I inherited the ranch, she made it clear that she expected us to sell it and move to San Francisco. She had no interest in ranch life, no desire to build something here. I realized I was more in love with the idea of her than with who she actually was, so I ended it." He paused, gathering his courage. "I've been waiting since then for someone who could love this place the way I do, someone who could see the potential in it, who could be a true partner in building a life here." Katherine set down her coffee mug, her hands trembling slightly. "And have you found such a person?" "I think you know the answer to that," Nathan said quietly. He moved from his chair to kneel beside her, taking her hand in his. Her fingers were finally warm again, and they curled around his with a tentative strength. "Katherine, I'm not a man who speaks in flowery words or makes grand romantic gestures, but I need you to know that these past 3 months have been the best I can remember in a long time. Not just because you've done brilliant work with the horses, though you have, but because I look forward to seeing you every morning, because I find excuses to spend time with you, because I go to bed each night thinking about you and wake up the same way." "Nathan," Katherine whispered, and there were tears shining in her eyes, "I'm not the kind of woman who stays. I have too much history, too many reasons to keep moving. I'll only hurt you in the end." "What if you didn't have to keep moving?" Nathan asked. "What if you could stay here, build a life here, and no one would ever judge you or threaten you or make you feel like you need to run? What if you could just be Katherine Sawyer, the best horse trainer in Idaho territory, and live in peace?" "That sounds like a fantasy," Katherine said, but there was longing in her voice. "It doesn't have to be," Nathan insisted. He brought her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Stay, Katherine, not just as my employee, but as my partner. Marry me. Help me build something lasting here. I promise you'll be safe, respected, and valued for exactly who you are." Katherine closed her eyes and a tear slipped down her cheek. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "I'm afraid that if I let myself believe in this, if I let myself love you, something will happen to destroy it. That's what always happens when I allow myself to hope." "Nothing is going to destroy this," Nathan said fiercely. "I won't let it. Katherine, look at me." He waited until she opened her eyes and met his gaze. "I love you. I love your strength, your gentleness with the horses, your quiet determination, the way you never give up even when things are hard. I love the person you are, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you deserve all the happiness you've been denied. Please say yes." For a long moment, Katherine simply stared at him, and Nathan felt his heart hammering against his ribs as he waited for her answer. Then finally she smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you. I'll stay, and I'll try to believe that this can work, and I'll do my best to be brave enough to accept the happiness you're offering." Nathan surged forward, cupping her face in his hands and kissing her with all the pent-up longing of the past 3 months. Katherine kissed him back with equal fervor, her arms wrapping around his neck, and for a long, perfect moment the world contracted to just the two of them, the fire's warmth, and the promise of a future built together. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I'll do everything in my power to make you happy," he promised. "Every single day for the rest of our lives." "I believe you," Katherine said, and the wonder in her voice told him she was surprised to find that she meant it. They married in the small church in Ruby City on a bright January morning in 1883, with Frank Holloway standing up as best man and the minister's wife serving as Katherine's attendant. It was a simple ceremony, attended by the ranch hands and a handful of townspeople who had gotten to know Katherine during her months in town. Sam Chen provided the wedding feast, a magnificent spread that combined traditional American dishes with Chinese delicacies that had everyone asking for recipes. As Nathan slipped a simple gold band onto Katherine's finger, he noticed that her hands were steady, her smile genuine. The wariness that had been her constant companion when she first arrived had faded, replaced by a cautious but real happiness. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her thoroughly, not caring that they had an audience, wanting everyone to know that Katherine was his and he was hers, now and always. They spent their wedding night in the ranch house that was now their shared home, and Nathan was gentle as he helped Katherine out of her wedding dress, patient as she navigated the vulnerability of allowing someone so close. She was brave and trusting and beautiful, and Nathan made sure she knew it, whispering words of love and admiration as they learned each other's bodies, as they came together with a passion that felt both inevitable and miraculous. Afterward, lying tangled together in Nathan's bed, their bed, now Katherine traced patterns on his chest and said, "I never thought I could have this. A home, a husband, a future. Thank you for being stubborn enough to convince me otherwise." "Thank you for being brave enough to take the chance," Nathan replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I know it wasn't easy for you." "Nothing worth having ever is," Katherine said. "But I think you're going to be very worth it, Nathan Rivers." "I'll do my best to live up to that assessment, Mrs. Rivers," Katherine laughed, the sound full and uninhibited in a way Nathan had never heard from her before. "I like the sound of that, Katherine Rivers. It has a nice ring to it." "It does," Nathan agreed. "And tomorrow, everyone in the territory will know that the woman who can calm any wild horse with a whisper is here to stay." Winter gave way to spring, and as the snow melted and the mountain meadows burst into bloom, Nathan and Katherine settled into married life with surprising ease. They worked side by side, training horses and managing the ranch, and Nathan discovered that having a true partner made every aspect of his life richer and more rewarding. Katherine brought not only her horse training skills to the marriage, but also fresh perspectives on ranch management, ideas for breeding programs that could improve their stock, and a business acumen that surprised and impressed him. In April, they took Midnight to a series of races in Boise City, and the Black Stallion performed magnificently, winning 3 out of 4 events, and earning Nathan and Katherine enough prize money to hire 2 additional ranch hands for the busy summer season. The racing circuit also introduced them to other ranchers and horse breeders throughout Idaho territory, and Katherine's reputation grew with each demonstration of her abilities. By summer, The Rising Sun Ranch was receiving requests from all over the territory for Katherine to train difficult horses or teach her methods to other trainers. Nathan watched with pride as his wife carefully selected which requests to accept, always insisting that any horse she worked with must be treated humanely by its owners, and that any student she took on must be genuinely committed to understanding horses rather than simply dominating them. "You're building something important," Nathan told her one evening in late June as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. "People are starting to understand that there's a better way to work with horses than the old rough breaking methods." Katherine leaned against his shoulder, her hand resting on the slight swell of her stomach. They had discovered her pregnancy a month earlier, and the knowledge had added another layer of joy to their already happy life. "I couldn't do it without your support," she said. Most men would have forbidden their wives from continuing this kind of work, especially once they knew about the baby. "I'm not most men," Nathan said, wrapping his arm around her. "And I married you knowing exactly who you are and what you're capable of. I'm not about to try to change you now." He placed his hand over hers on her stomach. "Our child is lucky to have you as a mother." "Our children will have both of us," Katherine corrected, "and I think that makes them the luckiest children in the territory." The baby arrived in early February 1884, on a cold morning when the world outside was blanketed in fresh snow. Katherine labored for 14 hours, and Nathan stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and offering whatever comfort he could. When the midwife finally placed their son in Katherine's arms, Nathan felt tears sting his eyes at the sight of his wife cradling their tiny, red-faced child. "He's perfect," Katherine whispered, exhausted but glowing. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months without reaching a firm decision, but looking at his son's small, serious face, Nathan knew exactly what felt right. "Thomas," he said. "After my grandfather, Thomas Rivers, the 4th generation to live on this land." "Thomas," Katherine repeated, smiling down at their son. "Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the ranch." As Nathan watched his wife and son, he felt a contentment so profound it was almost overwhelming. This was everything he had wanted, but never quite believed he would have a family, a partner who shared his values and his dreams, a future full of possibility. And it had all started because a woman with copper hair and sage-green eyes had stepped off a stage in Ruby City and shown him that sometimes the best things in life come when you least expect them. Thomas proved to be a healthy, happy baby who seemed to inherit both his mother's calm temperament and his father's determination. As he grew from infant to toddler, he also showed signs of Katherine's gift with animals, fearlessly approaching the ranch horses and giggling with delight when they nuzzled his chubby hands. "He's going to be a natural," Frank Holloway observed one afternoon when Thomas, not yet 2 years old, stood in the corral patting a horse's leg with complete confidence, just like his mother. "Let's hope he develops his mother's patience along with her talent," Nathan said, though he couldn't keep the pride out of his voice. "Otherwise, we'll have an overconfident boy who takes too many risks." Katherine, standing beside Nathan with her hand shading her eyes from the bright summer sun, laughed. "He'll have both of us to teach him. Between your caution and my intuition, I think we can keep him relatively safe." "Relatively," Nathan repeated with mock horror. "That's not as reassuring as you might think." Life on the Rising Sun Ranch continued to flourish. The horses Katherine trained fetched premium prices, and word of her abilities spread far enough that they occasionally received visitors from as far away as Montana and Wyoming, ranchers willing to travel great distances to learn from the woman who could calm any wild horse with a whisper. Nathan expanded the ranch operations, adding more breeding stock and experimenting with new grazing techniques that improved both the quality of their cattle and the sustainability of their grasslands. In the spring of 1886, Katherine discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she was less anxious about how pregnancy would affect her work, having learned with Thomas that she could continue her training activities well into her third trimester with proper precautions. Their daughter, Elizabeth, was born in October of that year, arriving with considerably less drama than her brother and immediately capturing the hearts of everyone on the ranch. "She looks like you," Nathan told Katherine as he held his tiny daughter for the first time. Elizabeth had Katherine's copper-colored hair, and what Nathan suspected would eventually be her mother's sage-green eyes. "I hope she inherits your gentle spirit." "And I hope she inherits your integrity and your strength," Katherine replied. "Between the two of us, she'll be well equipped for whatever life brings." Thomas, now 2.5, was fascinated by his baby sister and insisted on helping with her care whenever possible. Nathan watched his son very gently pat Elizabeth's head and felt his heart expand with love for his growing family. This life, this ranch, these people, they were everything that mattered. The years rolled on, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of their children's growth. Ruby City continued its slow decline as the silver mines played out completely. But the Rising Sun Ranch thrived, becoming known throughout Idaho territory as one of the premier operations for horse breeding and training. Nathan and Katherine were partners in every sense of the word, making decisions together, supporting each other through challenges, and building a legacy that extended far beyond their property boundaries. In 1889, when Thomas was 5 and Elizabeth was 3, Katherine began accepting a limited number of students, carefully selected individuals who showed both aptitude and the right temperament for her methods. She held training sessions in the summer months, teaching small groups while Nathan and the ranch hands managed the day-to-day operations. The students came from all over the Western Territories, eager to learn from the legendary Katherine Rivers, and many went on to become successful trainers in their own right, spreading Katherine's humane approach to horse training across the region. "You're changing the industry," Nathan told her one evening after a particularly successful training session. "In 20 years, your methods will be standard practice." "That's ambitious," Katherine said, but she was smiling. "Though I admit it would be satisfying to know that fewer horses will suffer because of what we're teaching here." "Not ambitious," Nathan corrected. "Realistic. You underestimate your own influence, Katherine. People listen to you. They respect you. You've earned that through years of consistent results and unwavering principles." Katherine turned to him, her eyes soft with emotion. "Do you know what I think about sometimes? I think about the woman I was when I arrived here, so convinced that I couldn't trust anyone, that I'd always be running. And then I think about who I am now, a wife, a mother, a teacher, someone with roots and a future. You gave me that, Nathan. You and this ranch and this life we've built together." Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "We gave it to each other. I was just a lonely rancher managing a declining property in a dying town before you came. You brought life and purpose back to this place, and to me. I love you more today than I did on our wedding day, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today." Katherine kissed him, pouring years of trust and affection and gratitude into that single connection. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her head on his shoulder and said, "I love you too, Nathan Rivers, more than I ever thought possible." In 1891, Idaho achieved statehood, transitioning from a territory to the 43rd state in the Union. Ruby City, once a booming silver town, was by then nearly abandoned, its population dwindled to fewer than 50 permanent residents. But the Rising Sun Ranch continued to prosper, sustained by careful management, Katherine's reputation, and Nathan's refusal to give up on the land his grandfather had claimed 40 years earlier. Their third child, a son they named James, was born in the summer of 1892. Thomas was 8 by then, already helping with basic ranch chores and showing every sign of becoming an excellent horseman. Elizabeth, at 5, was proving to be as fearless as her brother, much to Katherine's alternating delight and concern. "She climbed to the top of the barn yesterday," Nathan reported one evening, trying to keep his expression stern despite the amusement dancing in his eyes. "Frank found her sitting on the roof, braiding dandelions into chains." Katherine groaned. "I'll talk to her, again. Though I have to admit, she gets that fearless streak from both of us." "True," Nathan acknowledged. "We're going to have our hands full with that one." They did indeed have their hands full, but it was the kind of busy, chaotic, joyful fullness that came from a life rich with purpose and love. The ranch hands adored all 3 Rivers children, teaching them riding and roping skills, telling them stories, and generally spoiling them whenever Katherine and Nathan weren't looking. Sam Chen made special treats for them, patiently teaching them to make dumplings and egg tarts while sharing stories of his own childhood in China. Frank Holloway, now in his early 60s, became an honorary grandfather to the children, his gruff exterior melting away whenever Thomas or Elizabeth or baby James toddled over demanding his attention. Nathan sometimes watched Frank playing with his children and felt grateful that the old foreman had stayed with the ranch through all the changes and challenges of the past decade. The spring of 1895 brought unexpected change when a letter arrived from San Francisco. Nathan's estranged uncle, his father's younger brother who had gone west to seek his fortune in shipping, had died and left Nathan a substantial inheritance. The money was enough to make significant improvements to the ranch: new buildings, modern equipment, expansion of their operations. "What do you want to do with it?" Katherine asked as they discussed the inheritance over dinner. Thomas, now 11, listened with interest while 9-year-old Elizabeth helped 3-year-old James with his food. Nathan considered the question carefully. "I'd like to build a proper training facility, something with covered arenas so you can work year-round regardless of weather. Maybe expand the bunkhouse, add a real schoolhouse for the children. And I'd like to set aside a portion as a trust fund for Thomas, Elizabeth, and James, something to give them options when they're grown." "Those all sound like good ideas," Katherine agreed. "Though I'd add one more suggestion. Let's use some of the money to help Ruby City. I know the town is nearly dead, but there are still people here, people who have been our neighbors and friends. Maybe we could fund some improvements, repair the church, fix up the school, help the general store stay open. This ranch has been good to us. We should give something back to the community that's supported us." Nathan reached across the table and took his wife's hand. "Have I told you lately that you're the wisest person I know?" "Not since this morning," Katherine replied with a smile, "but I never get tired of hearing it." They spent the next year implementing their plans. A new training complex rose on the eastern edge of the ranch property, featuring 2 large covered arenas, a spacious stable with modern ventilation, and a classroom where Katherine could teach theory alongside practical demonstration. The bunkhouse was expanded and modernized, and a charming schoolhouse was built halfway between the ranch and what remained of Ruby City, benefiting both the Rivers children and the handful of other youngsters still living in the area. True to Katherine's suggestion, they also invested in Ruby City itself. The church got a new roof and fresh paint. The general store received enough funding to restock its shelves and make needed repairs. The school building, which had been closed for 2 years due to lack of students and funds, was renovated and reopened with a new teacher hired from Boise City. It wasn't enough to return Ruby City to its boom town glory, but it gave the remaining residents hope and help, and that mattered. "You're a good man, Nathan Rivers," Frank told him as they surveyed the completed training facility in the spring of 1896. Not many men would have thought to help the town when they could have kept all that money for themselves. "That was Catherine's idea," Nathan said. "She has a better heart than I do." "No," Frank disagreed. "She has a generous heart, but so do you. Why else would she have married you? That woman is smart enough to recognize a good man when she sees one." Nathan smiled, watching Katherine work with a young horse in the new arena, their 3 children sitting on the fence rail observing. Thomas was asking questions, his young face intent with interest. Elizabeth was mimicking her mother's hand movements, already preparing for the day when she'd be old enough to train horses herself. Little James was just happy to be included, his legs swinging and his expression content. "I'm the lucky one," Nathan said quietly. "I never expected to have all this: a wife I love, healthy children, a successful ranch, a real purpose. Katherine brought all of that into my life." "You two brought it to each other," Frank said. "That's how the best marriages work." The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own challenges and triumphs. There were difficult seasons when drought threatened their grasslands, and winters when heavy snows made everything harder. There were sick animals and broken equipment, and all the thousand small disasters that were part of ranch life. But there were also birthday celebrations and holiday gatherings, quiet evenings on the porch and Sunday picnics by the creek. Moments of laughter and love that wove together into a rich tapestry of shared life. Thomas grew into a serious, responsible young man who clearly would take over the ranch operations someday. He had Nathan's steady temperament and Katherine's intuitive understanding of horses, and by the time he was 15, he was already handling difficult training cases with impressive skill. Elizabeth proved to be the family's wild card, adventurous, creative, and utterly fearless. She wanted to do everything her older brother did, often insisting she could do it better. Katherine worried about her middle child's recklessness, but Nathan pointed out that Elizabeth's boldness was tempered by genuine competence. She might take risks, but she was skilled enough to handle most of them. James, the youngest, was gentler than his siblings, more interested in the academic side of horse training than the physical demands. He loved listening to Katherine explain equine psychology and behavior, and he spent hours observing horses and taking meticulous notes on their interactions and responses. Nathan suspected James might become a veterinarian or animal researcher someday, and he made sure his youngest son had access to whatever books and resources might nurture that interest. In the spring of 1900, as the new century dawned, Nathan and Katherine celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary. They were both in their 40s now, Nathan's hair showing threads of silver and Katherine's copper braids streaked with white. But they were still healthy and strong, still passionate about their work and each other, still building toward a future they could hardly have imagined when they first met. "I keep thinking about that day you stepped off the stage," Nathan said as they walked hand in hand along the creek that bordered their property. It was a warm May afternoon, and the mountains still wore caps of snow while the valleys below had burst into spring bloom. "You looked so wary, so ready to run at the first sign of trouble. I'm grateful every day that you decided to stay." "I didn't decide immediately," Katherine reminded him. "You had to convince me, and it took months before I really believed this could work." "But you did believe eventually," Nathan said. "You took the chance, and look what we've built because of it." Katherine stopped walking and turned to face him, cupping his weathered face in her hands. "We built something amazing, Nathan Rivers. A family, a legacy, a way of working with horses that's changing how people think about training. Our children are growing up knowing they're loved and valued. The ranch is thriving. We've created exactly the kind of life I never thought I could have." Nathan kissed her, long and sweet, pouring 17 years of love and devotion into that single connection. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "Here's to 17 more years," he murmured. "And 17 after that, and 17 more after that, for as long as we're given." "For as long as we're given," Katherine echoed. "I love you, Nathan, today, tomorrow, and always." They walked back to the ranch house as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. Smoke rose from the cookhouse chimney, promising a good dinner waiting for them. They could hear their children's voices raised in laughter somewhere nearby, probably pestering Frank or Sam for treats before the meal. The horses in the near pasture whinnied a greeting as they passed, and somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark sang its evening song. This was home, Nathan thought. Not just the physical place, though he loved every acre of it, but the life they had built here, the people who shared it with them, the future stretching out ahead full of possibility and promise. And all of it had started because he had taken a chance on a woman who could calm any wild horse with a whisper, and she had been brave enough to believe in him when he said, "My ranch needs someone like you." It turned out that his ranch hadn't just needed her. He had needed her, in ways he hadn't even fully understood until she became part of his life. And now, 17 years later, he couldn't imagine his world without her in it. The years rolled forward into the new century. Thomas married in 1905 at the age of 21, bringing his bride Sarah to live at the ranch. She was the daughter of a horse breeder from Montana, a practical young woman who shared the family's love of animals and understood ranch life. Within a year, Thomas and Sarah had given Nathan and Katherine their first grandchild, a robust baby boy they named Nathan in honor of his grandfather. Elizabeth, true to form, took a less traditional path. She spent 2 years traveling the western states, learning from various horse trainers and breeders before returning home in 1906 at age 20, and announcing her intention to establish her own training program specializing in difficult horses. Nathan and Katherine gave her a portion of the ranch land to build her own facility, and within a few years, Elizabeth Rivers had built a reputation that rivaled her mother's. James, as Nathan had predicted, pursued his academic interests. He attended the University of Idaho in Moscow, studying animal science and veterinary medicine. After graduation, he returned to the ranch and established a small veterinary practice that served not just the Rising Sun Ranch but ranches and farms throughout southwestern Idaho. By 1910, the Rising Sun Ranch had evolved into something far beyond what Nathan had imagined back in 1882, when he was a lonely rancher struggling to keep his operation afloat in a dying town. It was now a multi-generational family enterprise, with 3 distinct but interconnected operations. The main ranch run by Nathan and Thomas, Elizabeth's specialized training facility, and James's veterinary practice. Together, the Rivers family had created something that would endure long after they were gone. Katherine, now 50 years old, had largely stepped back from the demanding physical work of horse training, though she still consulted on difficult cases and taught occasional seminars. She spent more time with her grandchildren. Thomas and Sarah had 3 children now, and Elizabeth had married in 1909 and was expecting her first child. Katherine loved being a grandmother, loved watching the next generation discover the same wonder and joy in animals that she had known all her life. Nathan, at 57, had also begun to slow down, though he remained actively involved in ranch management. He relied more heavily on Thomas now, training his son to eventually take over completely. But he still rode out to check on cattle and horses most days, still made the major decisions about breeding and sales and operations. The work kept him strong and gave him purpose, and he had no intention of retiring completely as long as his body would cooperate. One evening, in late summer of 1910, Nathan and Katherine sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times over the past 27 years. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. In the distance, they could hear their grandchildren playing, their high voices carried on the evening breeze. Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this? Katherine asked, her hand finding Nathan's as naturally as breathing. Back when we first met, could you have predicted all of this? Nathan thought about the question seriously. No, he said finally. I hoped I might find someone to share my life with, hoped I could keep the ranch going despite the town dying around us. But this, he gestured broadly, encompassing the sprawling ranch complex, the multiple buildings, the corrals full of horses, the sound of family all around them. This exceeded my wildest dreams. Mine too, Katherine admitted. When I stepped off that stage in Ruby City, I was just hoping for a place to hide for a few months before moving on again. I never imagined I'd still be here nearly 3 decades later, married to the man who offered me a job, raising children and grandchildren on land that feels more like home than anywhere I ever lived before. My ranch needed someone like you, Nathan said, echoing the words he had spoken so long ago. But I needed you even more. You gave me everything, Katherine. A family, a partner, a purpose beyond just surviving. You made my life worth living. Katherine turned to him, tears shining in her sage-green eyes. And you gave me safety, acceptance, love. You taught me that not all men are threats, that I could trust someone with my heart and my future. You gave me a home, Nathan, in every sense of that word. They sat together in comfortable silence as darkness fell, neither feeling the need to fill the quiet with words. They had said everything that needed saying over the years, had built a foundation of trust and love so solid that it required no constant reinforcement. They simply were together, and that was enough. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Katherine leaned her head on Nathan's shoulder. I want you to know something, she said softly. No matter how many years we have left, whether it's 5 or 25, I will never regret saying yes when you proposed. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Nathan kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. The feeling is mutual, Mrs. Rivers. You are, and always will be, the love of my life. They remained on the porch until the night grew cold and the grandchildren had been rounded up and put to bed. Then they went inside to their own bed, the same bed they had shared for 27 years, and held each other close, grateful for another day together, another evening to watch the sunset, another night to fall asleep in each other's arms. The years continued their steady march. Nathan and Katherine grew older, their hair turning completely white, their movements slower but still sure. They watched their grandchildren grow, celebrated more weddings and more births, mourned the losses that inevitably came with time. Frank Holloway passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1915, and Sam Chen followed him 3 years later. Nathan felt those losses keenly. These men had been with him since the beginning, had helped build the Rising Sun Ranch into what it had become. But life continued, as it always does. New ranch hands were hired, new traditions were established, and the river's legacy grew stronger with each passing year. By 1920, the Rising Sun Ranch was one of the most respected horse breeding and training operations in the entire Pacific Northwest, known for the quality of its animals and the humane methods used to train them. Katherine's influence extended far beyond their own operation. Her students had spread across the western states, teaching her methods and spreading her philosophy that horses should be partners, not slaves, that understanding and patience produced far better results than force and domination. Articles about her work appeared in agricultural journals and magazines, and she received correspondence from horse enthusiasts as far away as Europe, asking about her techniques. "You've changed the world," Nathan told her on a warm afternoon in May 1925, as they celebrated their 42nd wedding anniversary. They were both in their 70s now, grandparents many times over and even great-grandparents to Thomas's grandchildren. "Not just our little corner of Idaho, but the whole world of horse training. Your legacy will outlive both of us by generations." "Our legacy," Katherine corrected gently. "I couldn't have done any of it without you, without the support you gave me, without the home you built for us." "We did this together, Nathan." They were sitting in the shade of a large cottonwood tree near the creek, the same creek where Nathan had proposed all those decades ago. Age had slowed them both, but they still tried to take these walks when weather and health permitted, still found joy in the simple pleasure of being together in the place they loved. "You remember that first day?" Nathan asked. "When you calmed midnight in the corral and I knew I had to hire you," Katherine laughed, the sound lighter now but still full of warmth. "I remember you saying your ranch needed someone like me. I thought you just meant someone who could train horses. I didn't realize you were offering me everything else to a home, a family, a future." "I didn't realize it either at first," Nathan admitted. "But somewhere between that first day and your proposal a few months later, I knew I couldn't let you leave. You were too important, too precious. I couldn't imagine my life without you in it. And now here we are," Katherine said softly. 42 years later, still together, still in love, still grateful for every day we get to share. Nathan took her hand, noting how thin and delicate it had become, how the veins stood out blue beneath papery skin. His own hands were no better, gnarled with arthritis and spotted with age. But when their fingers intertwined, he felt the same spark he had felt on their wedding night, the same sense of rightness and completion. "I love you, Katherine Rivers," he said. "I have loved you since 1882, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you, Nathan Rivers," Katherine replied. "Thank you for taking a chance on a woman who thought she could never stay in one place. Thank you for giving me a reason to stay, and for making every day of these 42 years worth living." They sat together until the sun began to set, painting the sky in the brilliant colors they had watched together thousands of times. Then, helping each other rise, they walked slowly back to the ranch house, their steps measured but their spirits light. Two people who had built a life together and were still, after all these years, grateful for the gift of each other. Nathan Rivers passed away peacefully in his sleep on a cold January night in 1928, at the age of 75. He simply went to sleep beside Katherine and didn't wake up, a gentle passing for a man who had lived a good and purposeful life. Katherine grieved deeply, as one would expect after 45 years of marriage, but she found comfort in their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, in the ranch that stood as a testament to everything she and Nathan had built together. She lived for another 5 years, remaining active in the ranch operations as an advisor and consultant, even as her physical abilities continued to decline. She delighted in her family, in watching the newest generation of Rivers' children learn to ride and work with horses, in knowing that the legacy she and Nathan had created would continue long after they were both gone. Katherine Rivers died on a beautiful spring morning in May 1933, exactly 50 years after she had arrived in Ruby City. She was sitting on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunrise over the mountains she had come to love, when her heart simply stopped. She was 76 years old, and those who found her said she looked peaceful, as though she had simply decided it was time to join Nathan wherever he had gone. They buried her beside Nathan in the small cemetery on the ranch property, under a cottonwood tree near the creek where he had proposed so many decades before. The entire community turned out for the funeral, along with horse trainers and breeders from across the western states, who had come to pay their respects to the woman who had revolutionized their profession. Thomas, now in his late 40s and the primary operator of the ranch, stood beside his mother's grave and spoke of her legacy. He talked about her gentleness with animals and people alike, her refusal to compromise her principles even when it would have been easier, her courage in building a life in a place where she had arrived as a frightened woman on the run. He spoke of her love for his father, a love so deep and true that it had sustained them both through nearly half a century of marriage. "My mother taught us that patience and understanding will always triumph over force," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "She taught us that trust must be earned, that respect goes both ways, that every creature deserves to be treated with dignity and kindness. She lived those principles every day, and in doing so, she made the world a better place. We will miss her terribly, but we will honor her by continuing the work she and my father began, by treating the animals in our care with the same compassion she showed, by building on the foundation they laid." As the mourners dispersed and the family returned to the ranch house, Elizabeth stood for a moment by her mother's grave, one hand resting on the headstone. The inscription was simple: Katherine Sawyer Rivers, 1857–1933. She could calm any wild horse with a whisper, and she calmed our wild hearts with her love. "Thank you, Mama," Elizabeth whispered. "Thank you for showing us what courage looks like, what love looks like, what a life well lived looks like. We'll make sure your work continues, that your methods survive, that future generations know the name Katherine Rivers and what you accomplished. Rest now beside Papa. You both earned your peace." The Rising Sun Ranch continued to thrive for generations, becoming one of the most respected horse operations in the American West. Katherine's training methods became standard practice throughout the industry, taught in agricultural colleges, and practiced on ranches across the country and eventually around the world. Books were written about her life and work, and she became a symbol of how one person's compassion and innovation could change an entire field of study. But perhaps her most important legacy was the family she and Nathan had built together. The Rivers family remained on the land Nathan's grandfather had homesteaded, raising horses and cattle, teaching the next generation the values of hard work, integrity, and kindness. They told stories about Nathan and Katherine around dinner tables and campfires, ensuring that the love story that had started when a wary woman stepped off a stage in Ruby City in 1882 would never be forgotten. The ranch endured through economic depressions and world wars, through droughts and floods, and all the challenges that tested those who made their living from the land. It endured because Nathan and Katherine had built it on a foundation of love and mutual respect, because they had taught their children to value the land and the animals in their care, because they had created something worth preserving. And on quiet evenings when the sun set behind the Awahi Mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The river's descendants would sometimes stand on the old porch and imagine they could still see Nathan and Katherine there, holding hands and watching the day end, still together in spirit as they had been in life, still building and dreaming and loving, forever bound by the words that had started it all. My ranch needs someone like you. Those words had been more prophetic than Nathan could have possibly known when he first spoke them. His ranch had needed Katherine, but more than that, his heart had needed her, his life had needed her, his future had needed her. And she had been brave enough to stay, to trust, to build a life with a man who saw her not as someone to be controlled or changed, but as someone to be cherished exactly as she was. In the end, it was a love story written not just in words but in the land itself, in the horses that carried the genetic legacy of Midnight and his descendants, in the training methods that bore Katherine's name, in the family that spread across multiple generations. It was a love story that proved that sometimes the greatest adventures begin not with grand gestures or dramatic moments, but with a simple offer of employment and the courage to accept it. It was a love story that endured, as all true love stories do, long after the lovers themselves had passed into memory and legend. And it was a love story that reminded everyone who heard it that home isn't always where you start, but where you choose to stay, and that family isn't always what you're born into, but what you build with patience, trust, and an open heart. The Rising Sun Ranch stands still, more than a century after Nathan and Katherine first joined their lives there. The current generation of River's descendants still trains horses using Katherine's methods, still works the land with the same dedication Nathan brought to it, still tells the stories of the couple who proved that love, when nurtured with respect and partnership, can create a legacy that spans generations. And sometimes, on those quiet evenings when the light is just right, and the wind carries the scent of sage across the valley, those who know the story swear they can still hear it, the soft whisper of a woman's voice, gentle and sure, calming the wild things and reminding them that with patience and love, anything is possible.